Welcome to episode 72 of Tales from the Hangman's Record and this special festive case. My name is Steve Fielding. All the stories on this channel are taken from my 3-volume series of books, The Hangman's Record, covering every execution in Great Britain and Ireland between 1868 and 1964. Copies of these and many of my other titles can be obtained through my website stevefielding.com. As this YouTube channel enters its third year in 2025, I need to update some of the hardware and software. I'm extremely grateful to everyone who has helped so far with donations towards the running costs over the last year, and going into the new year, I'm making a little plea that if you enjoy the video, can you spare £1 for the sound and £1 for the vid. Donations can be made by clicking thanks or using the link paypal.me/thehangmansrecord. Use the comments below for your thoughts on the case, whether justice was seen to be done, and suggestions for further episodes in this series. The season of goodwill towards all men is not without its share of crime and punishment. Records show that the hangman was at work throughout the Christmas holiday period, including, as we saw in episode 12, twice at Durham Jail on Christmas Eve, even as late as up till 1952. On one occasion in 1870, executioner Calcraft carried out a hanging in Manchester on Boxing Day, but as a consequence of the Aberdeen reports in the 1880s, when all hangmen had to be at the prison on the afternoon before execution, travelling on Christmas Day was therefore out of the question, and there were no further executions on the 26th. Killers also carried out their crimes on one of the holiest days in the Christian calendar. Today's tale from the Hangman's Record takes us back to Christmas 1909. King Edward VII is on the throne, and the year had started with the first old age pensions being paid to those over the age of 70, earning less than 12 shillings a week and of good character. Almost 500,000 folk were eligible in the first year. In April that year, the Young Persons Act is passed that prohibited the execution of anyone under the age of 16, although nobody of that age had been hanged in the UK for over 75 years. In popular music, songs such as By the Light of the Silvery Moon, The Ballad of Casey Jones, and Let's All Go Down the Strand were first published and recorded. Film is still in its infancy, but the year was to see the first science fiction movie shown at one of the new Bioscope theatres, and the acting debuts of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle and Mary Pickford. And, in the northwest corner of Wales, a brutal murder takes place on the island of Anglesey that was to put the busy ferry port onto the front page of national newspapers across the whole of Great Britain. William Murphy was not a man to tangle with. A former soldier, he had a reputation as a short-tempered, hard drinker who had been known to lay a man out with a single punch. In 1907, while serving overseas, he had earned a commendation for bravery when he single-handedly tackled a knife-wielding maniac. A burly soldier, overcome with sunstroke, went berserk and, picking up a bayonet, went on a crazed rampage, slashing out all around as people fled for their lives. Corporal Murphy sized up the situation and calmly announced he would sort it out. Ignoring warnings for his own safety, Murphy followed the soldier into a tent, emerging later with a knife man in a tight arm lock. Reinforcements took the man into custody as the assembled crowd congratulated Murphy. Several months after this incident, Murphy's unit, the Royal Anglesey Engineers Militia, which had served in India and South Africa, was posted back to North Wales, and it was here he became reacquainted with Gwen Jones. Born in Blanwy Festiniog in 1874, the daughter of a slate miner, in 1898 Gwen had married Maurice Jones, a labourer in a stone quarry. They adopted 2-year-old Gladys Jones, who had been born in the Clanriss workhouse and abandoned by her mother. and when she split up with her husband, she began to take in washing to make ends meet. It was through this that she met William Murphy, serving in the local militia, and currently in Anglesey, waiting deployment overseas. Gwen's son, born in 1903, was most likely Murphy's child, as she named him William John after both her lover and also her father. Murphy subsequently left the militia and took a number of jobs in Anglesey, including working on the construction of the Red Wharf Bay Railway and in the railway goods depot at Holyhead. He and Gwen set up home together, and in the summer of 1909, when Murphy relocated to his native Lee in Lancashire, she accompanied him. Murphy found intermittent work as a labourer, but as often as not would spend long hours in the public house, and upon returning home drunk, would become violent at the slightest whim. On weeks when he failed to bring home a wage, he would resort to begging. Gwen tolerated this for several months, until one particularly brutal beating left her with a black eye and a split lip. She waited until Murphy fell into a deep sleep, and then gathered up her children and fled back to her parents. In November 1909, she left her daughter with her father at Bethesda, and taking her young son, went to stay in a boarding house in Holyhead. It was suggested she may have worked as a prostitute to earn money for her keep, but with a new lover, Robert Jones, she began sharing a room in the common lodging house. After a few weeks without Gwen, Murphy made efforts to track her down. 2 weeks before Christmas, he called at her father's house and asked to see her. He recognised Murphy as the man who had mistreated his daughter and was reluctant to tell him where she was staying. Murphy then spoke to young Gladys, who let slip her mother's whereabouts. Murphy arrived in Holyhead on Monday the 20th of December and immediately began to make inquiries to find Gwen, even telling one bemused policeman, "I'll give it to her when I find her." Within a few days he caught up with her and asked her to come back with him. She refused, and on the following day was seen sporting a large bruise. Murphy was again heard to threaten her if she did not go back with him. They had another quarrel in the street on Christmas Eve, but despite the bruises, she did agree to his request to have a drink with him on the following day. At 6 p.m. on Christmas Day, Gwen Jones left her lodgings with Lizzie Jones, who also shared a room at the boarding house, and went for a drink at the Bardsley Island Inn. Inside, Murphy was at the bar drinking. He asked Gwen why she had failed to keep an earlier appointment with him. She told him that she had turned up a little late and must have just missed him. Later that evening, Murphy asked her friend if she would help him to arrange to see Gwen alone so that he could make a plea for her return to Lee with him. A short time later, the request granted, the couple left the inn. Within the hour, Murphy walked back to the bar alone. Sporting a scratch on his face that was still bleeding, he ordered a pint of ale and downed it in one. He slammed his tankard down, bid his friends good night, and left. He walked back to Gwen's lodgings and told one of their lodgers that he had been fighting with 2 men, but when Lizzie Jones returned, he admitted what he had done. "Fetch the police," he said quietly. "I've killed her." Murphy and 2 lodgers from the house walked to a spot off Walthew Avenue where some houses were being built and where a ditch had recently been excavated for a main sewage pipe. They stopped and Murphy pointed into the ditch. "Look, there's Gwen Ellen Jones." He then walked to the police station and confessed that he committed a murder. Police rushed to the scene and found Gwen lying in the ditch, the gaping wound in her throat leaving them in no doubt that she was dead. Close by, they found the dagger, the murder weapon. Murphy, who had been detained in custody, was then charged with murder. In the early hours of Boxing Day, he was questioned by Superintendent Prothero, the Deputy Chief Constable, and made a statement describing what had happened on the previous night. He said that after leaving the pub, they walked towards Walthew Avenue, a secluded row of residential houses that overlooked a wood. Murphy said he pleaded with Gwen to come home, but she was adamant that they were finished and again refused. In a rage, Murphy grabbed her by the throat and squeezed hard. Gwen fought bravely before he inflicted a severe wound in her throat with the knife, and as blood spurted out, she collapsed in a heap. He then callously picked her up, put both hands into the gash on her throat and tore her neck wide open. He then threw her lifeless body into the nearby ditch. Concluding, Murphy admitted, "We had a good hard fight, and I strangled her before I cut her throat." His trial before Mr Justice Pickford at Bow Maris Assizes on Wednesday the 26th of January, just a month after the murder, was a formality. It was the first murder in Anglesey for close on 50 years, and the tiny courtroom was packed solid with curious locals. Mr Ellis Griffiths represented the Crown, while at the judge's request, Murphy was defended by Mr Austin Jones KC. He could offer no reasonable defence to what the prosecution called a cold-blooded, premeditated murder. Evidence was presented to show that Murphy had travelled from Lancashire, first to Bethesda, where he had managed to obtain her address. He then made his way to Holyhead, where he tracked her down and made a number of vain attempts for her to return to Leigh with him. Finally, on Christmas Day, when it became clear all attempts at reconciliation had failed, he had savagely strangled her before cutting her throat. The court also heard that when Murphy was being taken from Holyhead to Caernarvon by train, he leaned out of the window and, pointing to the goods yard, told the escort he had planned to kill her there on the Thursday before Christmas, but changed his mind as she was with her son. Summing up, the judge asked the jury if they considered that Murphy was suffering from a form of insanity, as the defence had suggested. It was no surprise that the jury took less than 3 minutes to agree on a verdict of guilty of willful murder. There was no recommendation for mercy. Mr Justice Pickford then donned the black cap and sentenced the prisoner to death. Murphy had remained calm throughout and maintained his cool persona as he heard the words condemning him. He was returned to Caernarvon jail to await execution, which was set for Tuesday the 15th of February. Murphy accepted his punishment and decided not to appeal. It was reported that his behaviour in the condemned cell was excellent. He gave the guards no trouble and paid much attention to the words of the Catholic priest who visited him daily. As the day of execution neared, Murphy still remained calm and jovial, telling his guards he had no fear at the prospect of being hanged. He slept well on the night before, and when Hangman Harry Pierpont and his assistant William Willis entered the death cell, the former soldier showed a rare courage before his imminent death. He astonished the waiting assembly by climbing onto a chair and jumping back down to the ground. Smiling, he turned to startle Hangman and said, "I suppose it will only be like that." "Yes, that's all," Willis replied. "Well, I can do that," he declared, as his wrists were strapped behind his back and a procession formed. Murphy walked firmly to the gallows, situated in the tower across the prison yard, with the same resolution he had displayed 3 years earlier when facing the bayonet-wielding madmen. Gwen Jones was quietly laid to rest in an unmarked Porford's grave at Mortuary Cemetery, Holyhead, on the 29th of December. Her son and adopted daughter were taken into care and sent to different homes, and it is not known if they ever saw each other again. The speed with which justice was done, just 53 days between murder and execution, is one of the few notable facts in this sad and sordid case. William Murphy never denied his crime and showed no fear when paying the ultimate penalty. You'll be watching another tale from the Hangman's Record. Until the next time, thank you and goodbye.